Plain Truth, a place where we go into some of the mysteries about the world around us. I'm your host, Plain, and this time we're welcoming Richard Sauder back to discuss some of the issues and thoughts about what exactly is going on underground around the world. So, thanks, Richard, and thanks everyone for coming. I got a different question for you about underground digging.
Yes.
With all the high-tech development in the last 30, 40 years, and then we're right around the corner from good energy, cheap energy sources, I would start to think that small groups or even rich individuals may not be far away from being able to make their own underground systems. Have you got any thoughts on that?
Sure, that's happened. That's happened.
Well, in your book, talks about that guy from Liverpool, I guess it was. Or was it where was it? Liverpool? Blackpool? Just a rich guy on a hill, having teams of people digging for 25 years or something.
Well, the problem was, there were problems in the English economy in that era, and there were lots of unemployed men, and so he actually started kind of like a private public works project, for want of better words, to put these men to work. And for his own purposes, had them make miles and miles of underground tunnels and chambers. And have others done this? I'm pretty sure.
What are you going to say about Scientology? I'm kind of interested in.
Well, Scientology has a number of underground installations. They have one in northern New Mexico that I have read about. The Mormons also have a very secure, high-tech, very well-constructed underground facility, not far outside of Salt Lake City in the Wasatch Mountains, where they have their genealogical records and the state-of-the-art computer systems associated with that. Those are two examples of religious organizations that have their own underground installations. Of course, the Vatican has its renowned underground vaults that go back centuries. There are just a lot of things literally buried under Rome and under the Vatican that we know very little about. The Vatican certainly has many secrets pertaining to history, not only Christian history, but a lot of other aspects and facets of history going back centuries and presumably thousands of years. And what is all of that information about? Well, we don't know because we are not the Pope and high-level cardinals, etc., so we don't have access to the Vatican archives, to the vaults that are beneath the Vatican. So those are three examples of religious organizations that have their own controlled, closely held underground facilities. In the case of the Vatican, we're talking since ancient times. And then there are corporations that have their own underground facilities. I was told by a close friend back in the 1990s that the Otis Elevator Company, which has subsequently been bought out, I believe, by Thyssen, which is a German company, had a multi-level facility beneath its corporate headquarters in Connecticut, I believe they were. And so those are some examples I've run across from my own research. I absolutely know, because I've looked at the numbers for the cost of underground construction, that your average multi-billionaire tycoon like Warren Buffett or Bill Gates, etc., could easily finance one or more sophisticated, deep underground installations.
You mentioned earlier about Israel. Would you be able to talk a little bit about what they have there, Richard?
Well, there's been discussion in the popular press and on the internet and the newspapers in recent years of facilities. Israel is actually building a facility that it calls its 9/11 facility, which is a deep underground, sophisticated, highly secure facility. They're building that along. It's a joint Israeli-American project. I'm not involved in the project. I can't say more than I've read in the brief mention I've read in the open news media in the last year or so. That's one example. And then Barry Chamish, a few years back, had written about another facility that the Israelis have, a deep underground facility. So those would be two that have appeared openly on the internet in recent years. I presume they have more. The Israelis certainly have high technology and access to billions of dollars of American funding every year. So they don't want either. Well, that's a fact. They get billions of dollars every year. And so they can certainly use some or all of those $1 billion to dig anything they want, to buy any machinery they want, or to build any machinery they want. And in fact, the available evidence suggests that the Israelis are indeed burrowing deep underground. Given all of their nuclear saber rattling of the last quarter century, I very much assume that the Israelis may launch a nuclear war. The Prime Minister of Israel seems to want to do it, and they certainly have the technical capability and are preparing for it. All the evidence suggests they're preparing for it.
Well, if they can't get the West to do it for them, they might as well last resort to it themselves. But
they call it their Samson option. That if they decide they need to, they will simply launch a massive preemptive nuclear strike. And from what I've read, it would not only be against places like Cairo and Tehran, but against European cities as well.
Yeah, I've heard that before as well. One of the other questions I was wondering if you could elaborate on was what type of machinery are they using to dig these underground tunnels? I mean, I'm sure there's stuff we all know about, but is there any secret type stuff you've run across, like energy type devices?
Well, in my first book, I discussed this secret underground bases and tunnels. What is the government trying to hide? And yes, there are the so-called conventional tunnel boring machines, which are in wide use all around the world and have been for more than half a century. This technology is well known, well used, well discussed in all of the mining and civil engineering journals and magazines. There's plentiful evidence for that. In fact, right now in Quito, they're tunnel boring machines constructing the first underground metro or subway system here in Quito. So they're being used all over the world, including in South America. I discuss these certainly and have photos in my books of these machines. I also, especially in my first book, Secret Underground Bases, What is the Government Trying to Hide? That, in fact, there has been a fair amount of research on the part of the military-industrial complex into other types of tunnel boring using beams of high-energy electrons, for example, or lasers, high-pressure jets of water, including also other machines that would use a small nuclear reactor to create tremendous heat that would then be circulated to the tunnel boring machine's cutting head using liquid lithium. Lithium is a metal, but when you heat it up to 1700 degrees, more or less, it becomes a liquid like water and can be circulated, in theory, through the cutting head of a tunnel boring machine and would liquefy or vitrify the rock through which the machine is passing and then apply or glaze the sides of the tunnel with something analogous to obsidian. And after the machine passed, you would have effectively a glass-lined tunnel, a vitrified tunnel lining. Now, this has been discussed in the open civil engineering and mining literature. In fact, there was R&D work done on this technology at Los Alamos National Laboratory back in the 1970s. If this technology is being used, it's being used in the black world. I've seen no mention of it in the open mining and civil construction industries. That doesn't mean the military, for example, would not be using it. One obvious problem I can see is that in underground rock strata, you frequently have water. You have aquifers. And so if you hit an aquifer, an enclosed space, with a tunnel boring machine, the cutting face of which is 1,700 degrees, to my mind, you would run the risk of the mother of all steam explosions, which would be highly dangerous in the enclosed confines of a tunnel. If you had a huge steam explosion, all the forced explosion would be directed towards the rear of the machine where the human operators are, and would also tend to eject the machine or parts of the machine rearward with great force. So to me, that's one obvious problem. If it's being used, I would suspect it would have to be in places where there is little or no water, because if you hit a major aquifer with a machine like that, I don't see how it would work.
Well, I don't know, but I am curious with the rise in technology. And then, as I said, I think cheap energy is right around the corner. And I'm just wondering if that doesn't mean that small groups can start to do things. I mean, there's or at least there used to be, there's a small group in Germany that was building U-boats. Just take the old designs and build them. 5 people can do this kind of thing if they're, if they have a decent job and all that.
Oh, I don't know. For 5 people to build a U-boat, even a World War II U-boat, that's a substantial machine. You would need a
Well, they've done
serious
it.
shipyard.
No, they've done
Well,
it.
to,
Now, these are successful engineers, and I mean, it took them a few years to do it. But with today's manufacturing technologies, now this wasn't a big one. I'm not talking about the one hauling uranium or going down to Argentina or something. I'm talking about the earlier stage of what they had.
well, I mean, if you look at a World War II era German U-boat, that's a serious submarine. It's not a small machine. It's large and complex.
Oh no,
When
I'm
I
saying the machinery technology is what I'm talking about today. Not this. Obviously, a U-boat is a serious deal, but I'm just saying that.
it's a big boat. I mean, it's huge. Even World War II era technology was uh, pretty sophisticated. And I used to work in a fabrication yard when I was younger,
Hmm.
and so I know the amount of work that's involved in making a large machine made out of metal. In this case, it was I lived down south, and the factory fabrication yard I worked at was making machinery primarily for the sugar industry, the sugarcane industry, whether it was cane harvesters or the big boilers and so forth that you would have in a sugar refinery. So I know the type of equipment, the welding equipment you have to have, the cutting torches, the metal, the overhead cranes, the storage yard for the sheet metal and all of that. And so we're talking more than 5 men to build a German U-boat. I mean, frankly, we are. It's you need you need a serious, well-equipped fabrication yard.
Well, I mean, they have fabrication, and it's actually more than 5 guys. But I mean, the thing is, you shrink stuff down, you use modern technology that's made
Yeah.
costs a lot cheaper, and
Yes.
the bigger point is not the details of whether it's 5 guys or 10 guys or whether it's a 50% of life-size boat or a, you know, 70% of life-size boat, that kind of thing. Because I don't
Yes.
even know. I mean, I don't know how small the early U-boats were, right? I mean, it's not really the question of U-boats. The point is that the technology, broadly speaking, that was industrial scale in the past is getting down to the level where small companies or a single rich guy could do it. And we're not talking about Bill Gates here. We're talking about, a guy who's willing to spend $200,000. And So I'm kind of wondering if we're getting close to that point with maybe tunnel boring to where
Well,
you
let me
think.
tell you, you can. I discussed this in my third book, Underground and Underwater Bases. You can buy a used tunnel boring machine for several $100,000. I mean, if you have a few $100,000 and you want your own tunnel boring machine, you can buy it. However, shipping it is a bear because these things are hundreds of feet long. They're massive. They weigh hundreds, if not thousands of tons. And then you need, of course, the engineers to and technicians to operate and to maintain them. They're large, complex, powerful machines. And then you would also need the industrial infrastructure to cart this thing around, set it up, uh, put it in operation, keep it in operation, and then maintain the tunnel system once you built it and once you have the underground facility. In other words, you would have to have your own cadre of technicians, mechanics, engineers, miners, so forth, to both build and to maintain a sophisticated underground structure. It's not something that 5 or 10 people would do. We're talking about a major industrial effort.
Do you see any of the new technology making this dramatically cheaper?
Well, I don't know because I'm not on the inside of these projects, so I really can't say what the new technology is. I assume that there is new technology that's being held back not only from the public, but from industry per se. So without being on the inside, it's hard to say what they have. And I have talked to people who've been pretty much on the inside. And to a man and to a woman, and by the way, it's not only men who are who are in these compartmentalized projects, um, they just don't talk because the penalties for violating their oaths, I have to assume, are very high. These people, some of them do talk, but very guardedly, and and what they say is frequently indirect as well. They may direct you to a certain report or a certain journal, or give you a certain one or two key words and said, well, they'll say, well, if I were you, I might think about reading, looking into such and such a theme or such and such a technology, or they may mention a name. And then you may have to go out and spend 100 hours of work or more trying to decipher what they're trying to say. It's not that they don't want to talk. I think some of them very much want to. But for that reason, it's very hard to say what are the new technologies because I'm not on the inside and neither are you.
Sure. I'm just interested in things like 3D printing and
Well, I would assume
the new
because
energy stuff.
I would assume, well, I would assume because 3D printing is being discussed openly now, that whatever is taking place in high-tech underground bases, for example, or in the bases on the moon, or in the space station in orbit, must be at least one step beyond that. If that's being released publicly and people are, or at least a handful of people are beginning to use this publicly now, I assume that whatever is being done in the black world is on beyond that. One of the things that I believe is is happening is not just so-called 3D printing of inanimate objects, but, if you will, 3D printing of humans, like replication, genetic replication. That's what I would assume. Just connecting dots.
Well, that's a big topic. I mean, how far along do you think they would be? You mean just straight cloning?
I mean, maybe just like replicating, cloning, but maybe a little beyond that. I'll tell you why. Even in the open files or archives from Oak Ridge National Laboratory in Tennessee and from Los Alamos National Labs in New Mexico, I'm talking already in the 1990s, I was running across references to engineering of DNA, of replicating DNA and creating artificial DNA and structures with DNA, and also um, uh, connecting DNA or strands of DNA electrically with gold, fine gold leads, electrical leads. So I believe that if that is coming out in the open engineering and scientific literature, that the engineering of DNA is way past that. You have to understand that the lead agency on genetic engineering and DNA studies in the world is the United States Department of Energy. Exactly why that should be, I don't know, but it is. And so I assume that whatever dribs and drabs are coming out openly over the internet is far exceeded by what is taking place in the compartmentalized world. I'll give you one example. One of the people that I was contacted by when I still lived in the United States worked in secret underground facilities. And some of them I knew of, and he mentioned some I didn't know of, very deep, very high tech, that could take anything in the world. They were set up to take any object in the world. It could be a car tire, a CD player, a television, a railroad locomotive, a jet airplane, anything, a television set, and reproduce it, completely reproduce it underground in order to restart technological civilization without having to go all the way back to the Bronze Age, for example, and then spend 6,000 years starting it all up again. They would jumpstart it by just replicating everything underground. And there are multiple deep facilities like this in the United States. One of the things that he was concerned about was that he had blocks of missing time, and he couldn't remember what he had done and what had happened completely. He was an engineer who spent years of his career working in these deep underground, extremely high-tech, science fiction-like underground facilities. He didn't tell me the agency that operated it. Evidently, it's an agency that's not publicly known, but it's presumably somewhere within the American military-industrial complex. And he remembered seeing what seemed to be what he described as slabs of meat or sides of beef, something like that, in a kind of a liquid. And then there was something that would be roughly analogous to a keyboard that would be attached with places to put your hands and your fingers that would be like one part of this meat. And it was something, we don't have a word for this, something that was part meat and some kind of keyboard or electronic seeming mechanism that was incorporated in the slab of meat, and he would put his fingers or his hands into these this finger pad, or we don't even have a word exactly for what he was describing to me, and did something with this, programmed it or gave it instructions, or it gave him instructions. Who knows? He was having a hard time describing this to me, and I had a hard time understanding his description. He was having a hard time dealing with his memories and making sense of them, and I even more so. And then trying to relate it to you, I feel like a blind man fumbling in the dark. So what I'm suggesting to you is that what is taking place in these technologically cutting edge science fiction like underground facilities, and multiple such, is beyond our vocabulary. We don't have concepts, mental constructs for what's taking place. We don't have the vocabulary to describe it, even if we saw it. I don't know what we're into. I think I've reached a point with my underground basis research where I put no limits on what is happening down there. I don't can't tell you. I can only tell you there are underground bases. There are a lot of them. Some of them are really deep, very large, very, very highly sophisticated technologically. I mean, science fiction like. And beyond that, let your imagination run because we just don't know.
Well, I think we can get some ideas if we just imagine what DARPA would do if they had no limits, right? So
Yeah,
if
but
you want to work on life extension, right? You can't do it in a normal university if you have a lot of dead bodies lying around, right? So, if you've got people who are off the books, so to speak, whether they're born down there or clones or, bought on the slave trade, if a lot of them die, it's not a problem.
oh, I agree. In fact, we have a lot of missing people. And one of the things that bothers me the most about all of this is that while it's true, some people on the inside of these programs have spoke out, albeit very guardedly and indirectly and in always looking over their shoulder. The vast majority of them, 99.99% of them, say nothing. And, they have a responsibility to humanity. They really have to decide, are they on the side of the human race or not? Because what I can tell you is the tremendous secrecy does not bode well. On the contrary, it bodes ill. If I mean, it was Tom Valentine who observed years ago. He was interviewing me,
Mm-hmm.
and he observed that well, Richard, are with respect to the underground bases and what's happening there, are they doing these things for us or to us? And I have to come down on the to us side because if it's being done for us, why aren't they telling us? If it's all for our benefit, what's the problem in revealing what's going on? So I think by default, the assumption surely has to be that the vast bulk of what's happening is being done to us based on what we see the military industrial complex doing openly, war after war, invading country after country, savaging country after country, the drone assassinations week after week in country after country, the great violations of international law and human rights that are being carried out by the Pentagon. Why assume that they're behaving any better underground than they're behaving above ground? And in fact, I don't. I assume that if anything, if it's secret, that it's even worse than what they're doing openly.
Oh, I can go along with that, but excuse me, I think the people in governmental type things, these high level things, have the arguments that, you don't like to hear, but they tend to believe, like people can't handle the truth. I mean, I'll just throw something totally far out, so it'll make it easier for the listeners to not be too specific. But let's say that they have to, or whatever, see it wise to do negotiations with aliens, from far away, right? And the aliens want a place to do business, and they don't want to have to do it in Wall Street or Chicago or West Hollywood or whatever, right? And so they got some base for them in New Mexico. And then they can make it so the atmosphere is exactly what they want, and so on and so forth, right? Well, if you worked in that, right, and you suspected that that was the case, that it wasn't a cover story, that they were lying to you, would you come out and publicly say this? I mean, really, people aren't going to believe you, right?
Well, I
Nothing's
think
going
they
to
will. In
change.
fact,
They
yes, in
will?
fact,
I don't think
yes.
people will believe you.
In
I don't
fact,
think so.
in fact, I don't buy that argument that you can't handle the truth. In fact, I think what we cannot handle is the lies. And I'm sick of the lies. And I think if you look at the internet and you look at the ferment, not only in the United States, but internationally, it's not that people can't handle the truth. They can't handle the lies. And increasingly, that's what they're saying. Stop lying. Just stop it. And I arrived there a long time ago. And with each passing year, I have more and more companies. So I take 180 degrees the opposite perspective. And moreover, I suspect the galaxy is like everything else, in any given city in the world. You have your thug life, your criminal factions, but you also have a very large number of so-called good people, ordinary people, good people, uh, individuals endeavoring to live an honest, productive, ethical life. And if anything, they outnumber the other faction. I suspect, and the evidence strongly points this way, that the American military-industrial complex, with full knowledge, has thrown in with the thugs of the galaxy. Why? Because they promised them deadly military technology and technologies that they thought that they could use to further their agenda of war and control. Um, if these technologies were good for humanity, we'd have seen them by now. But they're holding it all back because it's dark stuff. I would suggest that even nuclear technology itself, why did all of a sudden, in the first half of the 20th century, with a sudden acceleration in the 1930s and 1940s, all of a sudden we had nuclear power, atomic bombs, hydrogen bombs that just blossomed all of a sudden in a 10 or 15-year period. Um, I suspect there was negative alien contact behind at least part of that, working with some of the very twisted souls. And it's interesting, and I would include people like Einstein and Oppenheimer and Edward Teller in this category. And of course, they're analogs to these men in other countries, Russia, Israel, China, etc. It wasn't only the American system, but especially at the beginning, it was the American system. These guys, Einstein wrote a letter to Roosevelt, President Roosevelt, saying, theoretically, I think we can make this an atomic explosive device and blah, blah, blah. And so FDR took that idea and ran with it. And then Oppenheimer was put in charge of the Manhattan Project. And after World War II, both Eisenhower and Oppenheimer were saying, well, nuclear weapons are a bad idea. We need to do away with them, etc. And they, more than any other individuals on this planet, pushed and vigorously for this technology. And having killed hundreds of thousands of people, said, oh, well, maybe it's not a good idea. You know what? That's just too late. And I don't buy it. I think they are two-faced. They're dead now, but I think they were as two-faced as you come. How can you work for years for this technology, which is designed to kill people by the tens and hundreds of thousands and by the millions, and then once it starts being used, say, oh, but that's not such a good idea. No? Well, it's your idea. And then with Teller, at least with Teller, he was, the template for Dr. Strangelove in Stanley Kubrick's film. At least Teller never apologized. I mean, he was an unabashed cold warrior and the so-called father of the H-bomb. And as far as I know, Teller was hard-nosed, hardcore to the very end, completely unapologetic for developing the hydrogen bomb. I don't respect what he did, but at least he was consistent in his views till the end.
Yeah, the scary thing you said is that if we are dealing with aliens, they must be negative oriented.
No, I didn't.
Because, well, I guess that's how I interpreted what you said. But if it was a beneficial ET race, would they really give these people weapons and technology of destruction and control and manipulation?
You're breaking up so bad, I had a hard time understanding. No, my view is that they're out there in the galaxy. It's like here on Earth. You have really nasty factions, and then you have benevolent, enlightened factions. The evidence suggests that the military-industrial complex, at least in the United States system, as we've known it over the last century or so, was approached by a very negative faction and threw in with that very negative faction. And my perspective is that faction is associated with this machine. I mean, look what we've got. We got atomic bombs, nuclear bombs, Star Wars technology, this kind of global surveillance and espionage conducted by the NSA, which, by the way, was set up in the post-World War II period. What was it, 1952, 1949, something like that? And the CIA was set up just a couple of years before that. And so I assume that this real secretive, furtive, dark, extremely violent, extremely oppressive espionage complex is part of this agenda as well. It all has grown up together, starting in the 5 or 10 years right after World War II, the underground bases, atomic bombs, hydrogen bombs, the ballistic missile program, the CIA, the NSA, all of this. And it's been so highly destructive and of life and of human rights and of the ecology of this planet, and so tremendously secretive and immensely expensive, just trillions of dollars has been sucked out of not only the global economy, but the United States economy, and it's accelerating. Money is just hemorrhaging by the trillions of dollars out of the economy, out of the pockets of the human race, the pockets, the billfolds, the wallets, the bank accounts. This has been a tremendously damaging. And at the same time, you have this huge cover-up of the extraterrestrial reality and UFO type technologies. It's all one big confused ball of wax, and it's been very bad for humanity. And for that reason, I say the evidence suggests that the system has gone all in with the bad boys of the galaxy, because what's happening is not good.
Well, that may be. I mean, there's certainly a case for that.
I just made it.
Yeah, you did. I agree with you. I think there's that case. I just think that if I can play devil's advocate, I'll look at the other side. The other side would be...
Why look at the other side? Because we're pestered with the other side day in and day out.
No, the other side is not the moral side. The other argument is not the moral side. The other side of the argument is that once you get to critical mass, okay, so I'm from a background of technical stuff, and my parents and, family is full of people working at those places that have names, places like Oak Ridge or, rocket places or things like that.
So why excuse that? Because it's taken us down. It's taking us down hard. There's
right.
No
but now let me get to my point, though, Richard. My point is, I don't think you need ET once you get critical mass. Okay? And I think that at some point we got to critical mass. Now, there's a strong case to be made for this ET element, but it may have been metaphysical, like the Germans,
No, I think it was nuts and bolts. That's the whole point of
Yeah, but I'm saying it may have started out. It may have started out as metaphysical contact, and then it's what I mean. Kind of like ESP kind of stuff or whatever.
Well, we're talking about remote viewing here.
No, I'm not talking about remote viewing. I'm talking about the secret societies that came out of Europe in the late 1800s working to develop contact, and then maybe it gradually got to where they got hints as to how to develop things and so on. But I'm just saying, from a technological point of view, at some point we got over the hump. We don't need ETs at this point. Once you got the kind of money and technology and stuff they've got, they can play around with DNA or this kind of stuff all day long, and the aliens can go home, and we're still going to be on the same path. That's the other side of the argument. I'm not talking a moral argument here. I'm talking about a technical argument from a technologist here. That's all I'm saying.
I know, and this is yet another facet of my research, which strongly suggests that already beginning decades ago and continuing down to the present, in fact, there has been this strong joint cooperation between one or more ET factions and highly compartmentalized faction or factions within the military-industrial espionage complex. And I mention this in my most recent book. I have one chapter one short chapter devoted to that. Um, and and there's a great deal of evidence along that line. I mean, you have the books that have come out from the woods, Father and Son, um, and then you have the research of Richard Dolan, you have the research of others into Roswell. There's just abundant evidence of ongoing, decades-long involvement at the highest levels in extremely compartmentalized ways of the not only but especially the American industrial military industrial espionage network, just a complex, just up, down, and sideways, inside and out. So I hear what you're saying, and from all objective evidence, it's some of the best researchers we have. It just ain't so, man. The fact is, for decades, half a century or more, there's been very close collaboration and cooperation between these Oak Ridge, Los Alamos, and even more secretive than that, in the
Oh,
underground
hey, I
bases.
understand. I just look, I've spent a fair bit of time looking into the Roswell case, and I think, like
But it
Joseph
goes well
Farrell.
beyond. Goes
Oh,
well
I
beyond
know, but
that.
let's just take the stuff we can look at because there's so much evidence you can get into. I think that Joseph Farrell's work and others looking into it makes a reasonable case that this has Nazi craft written all over it, and that the ET stuff is part of the cover. Now, this doesn't mean I'm denying ET, and I'm not, or whatever. I'm just saying that when you look at some of this, the ET is also a legend, is what I'm trying to say. It's been the most useful thing for the military industrial complex ever because it's an explanation that isn't an explanation. It's an explanation that turns everybody off from the evil they're up to. And so that's why they promote it. I mean, you don't think people like Spielberg are up there getting huge budgets and so on and so forth for nothing, right? The alien thing has been useful for them because it's a laugh topic for the masses, right? The
Wait, no, no,
Greys and the, you know what I
increasingly,
mean?
no, increasingly, it's not a laugh topic for the masses. It's a laugh topic for the people who are engaged in the cover-up. What I would say is these are not exclusive uh, realities. The Nazi agenda and the Nazi international network is real. It exists, and there's abundant evidence of that. On the other hand, or along with it, I would say equally so with beings with advanced technology, either from other planets or other dimensions or both. And there's evidence of this going back into remote antiquity. This was well discussed in the Vedas, for example. If you read the Vedas, which are the ancient Sanskrit writings from the Indians, from South Asia, going back centuries and even thousands of years ago, these ancient texts are replete with descriptions of beings coming and going from other planets and of their technology, their space technology and their aerial technology. And this is from thousands of years ago, well before the Nazi movement or Nazi ideology of the last century or so. So
Richard,
clearly,
I'm with you, but you see the
both both
construct. If
both
you were working
both
in DC, you would
yes.
want the two paradigms. Roswell is a balloon that crashed. Or no, it's aliens who flew from, trillions of light years away and they got stuck in a thunderstorm and crashed or whatever, right? Those are the two things. And what I'm saying is, you notice that what's not in there are the two obvious things that stand out to me. One is it's a German oriented Nazi NASA kind of craft, either with American help or without American help. Or it's got something to do with, let's say, ET help of the black budget crowd, right? In other words,
Well,
it's a construct created that the whole debate in the United States about Roswell has been a debate that can't lead to, in my mind, the likely places it should go. You may
well, if you
disagree, but that's what I'm
well,
trying to say.
I don't want to spend too much time on Roswell, but I
Mhm.
would say my understanding is there were two and possibly three so distinct Roswell events in an approximate July time frame of 1947. One, the so-called Roswell crash of lore was actually not in Roswell. It was much closer to the town of Corona, which is north of Roswell. And then evidently there is at least one other crash, which is about 100 miles to the west, near where the Very Large Array right now is, on the other side of Elephant Butte. And then there may have been yet one more near the Capitan Mountains. So, and it may well have been that there was some Nazi saucer technology that came down. There might also have been so-called alien technology, and there could have even been an indigenous American saucer for all that we know. I don't know exactly what happened in 1947 in New Mexico, and it may not be easy to determine that at this remove, because so much confusion has been thrown over it by the United States military and no one else, by the United States military. For whatever reason, the United States military has a very strong interest in confusing, concealing the evidence as to what really did happen in Roswell in 1940, in New Mexico in the summer of 1947. And I'm back around to my original point. If there were good things that were happening, then there should be no problem with telling the people. The fact that there's so much lying, so much secrecy, so much propaganda indicates that what happened wasn't good. And we're back around to the underlying motivation of the United States military industrial espionage complex. It's evil. They lie, they dissemble, they conceal, they propagandize, they murder, they rendition people, they torture, they conduct war after war after war. They steal money, not by the billions, not by the tens of billions, not by the hundreds of billions, by the trillions. What I'm saying is that they are a pox on humanity. They're not up to anything good.
Well, I hear what you're saying. So I guess I have a question for you then. Just if you had been working in the system at that point, and
But I wouldn't have been. That's the point. I am congenitally opposed to that type of system, so I wouldn't have been.
well, then I mean, okay. But if we're not, I mean, let's say then that you stumbled across the evidence. You'd been working as a reporter in New Mexico.
I'd
And you
publish
came,
it. That's the evidence. That I would publish it. That's the whole point of my books on underground bases and mind control. And it's the whole point of my multiple blog postings and what I've seen with ayahuasca and the machine and its agenda. The point is that people like me communicate important information. Don't conceal it. That's why I'm not working for the CIA. That's why I'm not working for the NSA. That's why I'm on the outside looking in to this underground bases project. There's all of us have to make a decision, and that's what I'm saying openly to these people in these programs. They have to do a gut check and make a basic decision at the level of their individual life. What the hell is the point of their life? Is it to lie, to dissemble, to cover up, to conceal, to propagandize? Is that what it's all about? If so, why are you here? Because you're afflicting humanity.
well, having talked to these people and having known many of them, I think the argument would be more like if you knew somebody had cancer, let's say your parents had cancer, the doctor says, do you want them to know or not know? They're in pain or whatever, giving them something to keep the pain under control or whatever. The answer is, do you want them to have hope or not? And, that's how they see it. But by the way, I wanted to get back to
wait a minute. Let me address that. That's very condescending. That's very paternalistic. And my response is, I'm a mature human being. In fact, I'm more capable of making that decision than they are. And you know what? It's very presumptuous of this small group of people to determine that they alone are uniquely qualified to make those decisions for all of the rest of humanity. Why? Well, because they're them, of course. And in their conception, they are superior to the rest of humanity. So therefore, they lord it over everyone else by carrying out these programs. They're sucking money out of all of us by the trillions of dollars. You know, more than that, they're vampires, they're leeches, they're thieves, they're robbers. They have very low morals. They have the morals below that of a street thug. A mugger on the corner is going to mug you, what, of $20, $40. These people are stealing from us by the trillions, and then they pretend that they have our best interest at heart? Oh, please, please.
Well, I am with you, but I think the argument on the other side is more like,
well, if you were with
it's
me,
an
you
evil
wouldn't say
world.
but. No. If you were with me, you wouldn't then follow that by saying but.
I'm a strong believer that you have to have the other position for everything. The devil's advocate is the most important role in the world, to me. And so
Well,
I
but
want
see,
to hear the other
we
side.
get
So
your
let the
point.
other side is do you have,
No, we get
what
your
are they
point in
talking
the
about?
newspaper every day. We get your point on CNN every day, on Fox News every day, that we're babies, that we need politicians to do things for us, that the generals who are about to destroy the world with their nuclear weapons know better than we do what to do. Oh, really? If they know better, why have they brought us to the brink of disaster?
Well, Richard, I think I'm giving the devil's advocate. I'm trying to say you've got a very
Why do
strong
you
point
work
of
for the
view.
devil, man? I don't. I give the devil his due. He works
Well, you
day
know
and
the
night,
argument. You know the
24/7.
argument, more and all that. The argument is once you get rid of the law, which is what I'm arguing here. The law is that both sides get their side presented to some extent. Then what's left to protect you? Then you're just left with nothing. I'm arguing that the people there make certain arguments, and you ought to be able to hear them, and you've heard them, and you're sick of them. But I'm saying that one of them is it's a brutal world, and that's why you need a military. That's how
Well,
they get
why do
into
we need
it
to
with their
listen to
patriots.
alternative radio to hear Pentagon propaganda? Why do we need to listen to alternative radio to hear the Pentagon side? We get that every day, 24/7, up, down, and sideways. A newspaper, magazines, radio, television, the main internet websites. So why do we need to have alternative radio? I mean, what's the point of your show if you're going to always come at me with the Pentagon's point of view? I know the Pentagon's point of view, and it's disgusting.
Well, first of all, the last thing I think is that I'm giving the Pentagon's point of view. I think people are going
Well,
to
you
always
are.
be,
Over and over
well,
again, you
I
are.
disagree with you. I'm saying here
Okay.
are the arguments and what is your response to them? For example,
Well, I've
I
given you.
asked if you were working in the system. Okay, let's say you'd been working at some base underground, right? And for whatever
Well
reason,
operated by the
you're an,
military industrial espionage complex.
well, it's all one big complex. Let's say you're an engineer, okay? You're a mining engineer. Next thing you know, you end up because your company promotes it or it's near where you want to live or whatever reason, it's a deep underground thing and you have to sign contracts. But you sign secrecy agreements your entire life in America today. Everything is an NDA. You know that, not just the military. Everything is NDA. So you're working on something. And then over time, you get the idea this is really strange. Why do they need a special atmosphere down here? Right? It's not a normal human atmosphere they want, right? You find this out. And then you get a chance. It's totally compartmentalized. You hear from another guy down there, and he says, I don't know, but something came by. I'm not really sure. I'm not even, maybe this isn't even really for humans. There's something really strange going on down here. And of course, it's all hush hush. Your boss isn't going to want to
Well, you
talk
know what?
about this.
Let me cut to the chase here. I, I, I don't know, and I suggest that you put out a public appeal for these people to come on your show and justify what they've done. I can't, so you have to talk to them. I'm saying to them, what you're doing is wrong. If it was so right, why can't we know about it? And the very fact that none of these people are coming on your show indicates that something real ugly is going on. If you're doing things that are perfectly above board. It's no problem to talk about them, right? But none of them are.
Well, they're
So
not
it can't
because the
be all good.
punishment is so great. You mean why
Can't be
can't they?
all good.
Punishment is so good, is so severe, which you know, right? But I mean, you said that they should be coming out, and I'm saying people get sucked into this. They get into a system they didn't expect to be dealing with aliens underground. He's just a mining engineer, right? But he ends up working for a company that gets bought by Tayson, and then at some point, next thing you know, the job pays well, and next thing you know, he doesn't know that he's working on stuff for dealing with aliens. He's just creating a strange environment underground that makes no sense to him, and he doesn't
You know,
even know what's going on.
I'm back. I can't answer your question. You need to have these people in the program, and if they won't come on the program, I can't talk about that because I'm not an insider. I'll say again, I can only go so far, and I have. Beyond that point, I can't tell you what I don't know. I can only tell you that because of the fact that trillions of dollars are being sucked out, people are vanishing. I mean, I see posters up here in Ecuador. There are so many stories about missing people in the United States. All over the world, there are people just vanishing by the thousands. Where are these people going? There are awful things happening on this planet that just are not being discussed by the mainstream news media. The military-industrial espionage complex absolutely has to know more about these things than we do, and they say not one word. In fact, they're some of the biggest killers there are. So I'm back around to saying tremendously wicked things are going on. The military agencies are involved. The espionage agencies are involved. The big Fortune 500 companies are involved. Just ugly, wicked, repugnant things that are destroying people's lives by the millions and sucking trillions of dollars out of the economy. And these agencies are just devastating the global environment, the global ecology, and I can't defend it. And I'm not going to play devil's advocate for them, and we need to stop doing that. That's childish.
Well, I think that you have to explore arguments, but I can see we're not getting very far on this one here. So I think we can try to move on a little bit beyond that.
I'm just not going to go to bat
question.
for these. Listen. I know you have family in these agencies and organizations. You've said that, and you know what? If you want to play devil's advocate for them, fine. I won't, and we will port ways there because look at the planet. This planet is being devastated by these agencies, and you're going to tell me you're going to play devil's advocate for them? Where are you coming from, man?
Well, first of all, look, when somebody's working in the military, let's say somebody is doing anything in the military, logistics, you're making sure that the food goes wherever to some base. It's all part of the machine that you talk about. Okay?
It's huge. It's huge. And
okay? But that's also true for, look, come on, what is not part of the machine in the United States? Tell me,
Well, that's
okay,
one reason
let's take your family then, Richard. You're going to give me a hard time. Let's take your family. Tell me your family, let's say up to cousins or uncles or whatever, whatever. How could they survive in the United States in today's world and not be part of the machine? It's the whole country.
I agree, and that's one reason I'm not there anymore. That's one reason why I went to jail repeatedly in the United States. I spent a year and a half, more than a year and a half, going through a dozen different jails and prisons for nonviolent, peaceful demonstrations on nuclear missile silos and at Navy bases where nuclear weapons are either stored or deployed. I was active in civil rights. I took a series of menial jobs far below what my academic qualifications would have enabled me to do because of fundamental disagreement with exactly that, the machine. And certainly there are people I know, friends and family members, who come to a very different decision, and that's absolutely correct. But I've left the United States. In fact, I have applied for political refuge in Ecuador. The United States for me is just a repugnant system. It's taking the planet down, man. Look at what's happening in Fukushima, for example. General Electric, they have the slogan, "We bring good things to life." And in fact, they designed 5 out of 6 of the nuclear reactors that at Fukushima, and 2 out of the four that had problems were actually built by General Electric. So even with this so-called Japanese disaster, it's one of the major American high-tech companies that is ultimately behind it. So you're right. This machine has an American fingerprint all over it, and America is its foremost proponent and foremost servant, if you will. The economic system, the military organization, the Fortune 500 companies, the university system, it's all part of it, and the NSA, the CIA, and it's disgusting.
Well, my trips around Latin America just show places that want to join the machine.
Well, you have to understand the influence of the Monroe Doctrine, which says essentially Latin America is in our sphere of influence, and we will intervene and control the events in this hemisphere. And that's been the American policy for about 2 centuries now, and continues to the present day. There's been military coup after military coup in Latin America, backed by either the Pentagon or the CIA or both. The classic case is United Fruit in Guatemala in 1954, where the CIA and United Fruit, the big banana and pineapple company, worked together to overthrow democratically the Arbenz government, the democratically elected government, and institute a military dictatorship. And to this day, Guatemala is racked by authoritarian politics and violence for more than half a century now, and there are multiple examples like that in Latin America. So
But Richard,
a lot of the political dysfunction. Let me finish. I have a master's degree in Latin American studies. A lot of the political dysfunction that you see in Latin America is directly attributable to malevolent, violent intervention by the Pentagon, the CIA, and Fortune 500 companies in this hemisphere.
Oh, I'm with you on this. I just think that I was in Guatemala not that long ago, and my impression was it was very, very pro-U.S. everything. Whatever was American was what they wanted, whether it be Walmart, fast food. By the way, fast food is kind of like a luxury item that you show off. You spend more to get McDonald's, right? Because you want everyone to see you carrying the McDonald's bag around.
Well,
and
this
so
is
what used to be done with CIA coups is now done with PR campaigns to convince people that America is great and best, if you ask me.
Well, it's Madison Avenue, it's Hollywood. The American system has destroyed traditional agriculture, or is destroying traditional agriculture throughout Latin America. They have subverted traditional economies and prevented them from developing naturally. Whether you agree with him or not, Che Guevara, in his own way, was trying to initiate indigenous economic development in Latin America, first in Cuba, then he went to Bolivia. And the Americans sent down, goon squads, snipers, to track him down and kill him. There was the CIA and the United States Army had tracked him down in the wilds of Bolivia and tortured him and killed him. And they've done this. Look, 3 years ago, September 31st, there was an attempted coup against Rafael Correa. Why? To this day, he's the second most popular president in this hemisphere. He's got an approval rating in Guatemala and Ecuador is something like 84%. I'm not saying he's a perfect man. I'm just saying that the vast majority of Ecuadorian people think he's a good president. Compare that to Barack Obama's approval rating, for example. It's more than twice as high. And yet there was an attempted coup against him September 30th of 2010, and there was actually a shootout here in Quito. It was a serious attempt to take him out. But his bodyguards fought to defend him. As they explained later, they took an oath to the Constitution, not to him, but to the Constitution. And his military chief of staff also stayed loyal. So there was a division in the power structure, and because of that, he survived. But there was actually a firefight right here in Quito, and people got killed. His bodyguards fought back, and I mean, so what I'm saying is right down nearly to the present day. They're still meddling, and look what happened to Evo Morales. Just was it 2 months ago when his plane on American directions was not given permission to fly over either France, Spain, or Portugal on his way back to South America. He had to turn back to Austria. The plane nearly crashed. It nearly ran out of fuel. He was forced to land. He was detained. The plane was searched. I believe he was also searched. It was a massive violation of centuries-old diplomatic protocol and international law at the direct instigation of the NSA. So to the present day, you have this ham-handed violent meddling by the American agencies in Latin American politics. So there's a reason for what you see in this region, and it's directly attributable to the very negative, counterproductive, oppressive, I have to say it, neo-fascist American foreign policy.
True. But I do think that around the world, the machine includes the lure of American culture. And
It
you
does.
yourself said that a minute ago. And
Well, I
my
agree with that
experience in
completely.
Guatemala is they all want to move to the U.S. They don't want to leave the U.S. They want to become part of the U.S. And I know that some of the Indian communities don't feel that way, but I'm saying the broad, Guatemala City environment is definitely 100% that way. So look, we understand that the American machine is this incredible force that's been taken over and is trying to take over the world and destroy it, and it's bad. I'm just a fan of using honey as opposed to vinegar. But
What
I
kind of
think
honey? What kind of honey?
any kind of honey to try to get people to see that
Well, there's all
we're
kinds
going
of
in the
honey.
wrong direction. We're going in the wrong direction, Richard, and telling people, well, 99.9% of you people in the United States are criminal, evil SOBs who didn't listen to me when I protested.
No,
And
those are your
now,
words. Those are your words, not mine.
okay, well, I'm
Those are
just
your
saying
words,
that I
not
want
mine.
to use honey. I want to use honey, not vinegar. I want to say to people, look, we're in this together to some extent. There are evil people, can't we, more along the lines of, can't we as the 99% try to deal with the 1%? That's what
And
I'm
yet that's
trying
and
to
yet
work
that's
for.
and yet that's not happening.
Well, is your approach happening? I mean, what do you recommend?
What I recommend, and I've done this in my writings, is a radical upwising of humanity. To this point, a radical upwising of humanity hasn't happened, but it must if we are to survive as a species. Necessarily, this happens one person at a time. Unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of thousands of years to reach this point, or of centuries, or of even decades. Years at the most, perhaps even months. And so for that reason, when you have someone who's very deeply asleep and the house is burning down, do you rush in and start reading them, singing a lullaby or something? No. You grab them by the arm, you say, wake up. You grab them, you shake them violently, and if need be, throw them over your shoulder and flee the premises as fast as you can. In an emergency situation, you do what you have to save whom you can. The fact is, a very great percentage of humanity are fast asleep, and our situation is far worse than simply one house burning down. I repeat again, if you had to pick one issue, and there are more than one, but if you had to pick one issue, it'd be the nuclear issue because as we speak, at a minimum, 45% of the Earth's surface is being cleansed of biological life. The nuclear contamination of the Pacific Ocean from Fukushima alone is an extinction level event, and it won't take a century to work itself out, maybe not even 10 years. There are serious ecological problems right now, and if we don't come to grips with it, I don't care. We're all going bye-bye. We're not in a honey situation. And if you don't grasp that, then all I can say is good luck, because you failed to connect with reality as it is. And you have failed as a human being to engage what's going on the planet. We have a responsibility to grow up. And I don't know, I'm not cutting this, these engineers at General Electric, the people at TEPCO, the people in the Japanese government, the American government, whatever they've done, it's not good enough, because together they have jointly conspired to create a situation that is killing the planet. And it's not satisfactory. And we can't accept that. To accept that is to accept extinction, not only of humanity, but of a very large portion of the biosphere. I repeat, the Pacific Ocean is dying right now. We can't get along without it. We just can't. So we have to make a U-turn as a species, and we don't have a lot of time. All I can say is deal with it. And I'm not going to play devil's advocate. We don't have time for these childish games either. We have to grow up.
Well, I feel, and I have felt, that I'm trying to do my part. And I've been trying to do this for decades, by the way, even when it is certainly not in one's, let's say financial interests or whatever. And it's starting to show some results, and maybe it's too late, but I think there is a general awakening going on in the Western world, and maybe it's too late. Maybe you're right. It's the only thing to do is say the fire is so bad and just, throw vinegar everywhere and hope it wakes people up in that sense and gets them moving. But I'll defend the approach I've taken. And
well, what is that approach? I mean, what have you done, for example?
To try to get people to see the dark side of where things are going. In other words,
how have you done that?
Well, I've done it in countless ways. We're talking decades here. So, but
for example, I went on to nuclear missile silos again and again, to military bases.
But that doesn't wake people up, Richard. That doesn't do it. I know the technical guys. I know the books. That's a great thing. But going on a nuclear silo, I don't think wakes people up. I don't think you can force people to wake up.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't force anyone. It doesn't force anyone to do anything. What it does is confront publicly the issue. And in fact, I mean, I had U.S. Marshals tell me, protesting, it's so 1960s. Oh, yeah? So what are we supposed to do? Just remain quiet with not one word of objection? In fact, because I went to the silos, there were hundreds of websites and newspapers and TV broadcasts that, at least to that extent, had to say something about that I went there, what I was saying, and where I was. Had I not done that, there would have been no mention on the TV broadcasts, no mention in the newspapers. The court system would have not dealt with the issue at all. There would have been no conversations with other prisoners. There wouldn't be this conversation now with you had I not done all of these things.
Well, I'm not sure about that. I think the great thing you've done is
we wouldn't be talking about nuclear policy and that type of thing if I hadn't have gone to the nuclear missile silos, because there would be no basis for you to raise the issue or me. In fact, I would guess that maybe not one of your guests has been done the things that I've done and had this type of conversation.
That's a fair assumption.
So therefore, we're discussing thoughts and raising issues that are very infrequently discussed and raised in this society, including in the so-called alternative press. And it's been interesting. So many people have told me it really it touches a nerve in so many people to actually go on a nuclear missile silo and say, hell no. You shall not do this, because this technology is planet-destroying technology. And I, as a sovereign human being, cannot agree and do not agree, and I object. Out come the chains, out come the handcuffs, out come the jail cells, and even from the alternative press. Oh no, well, that's not the way to address it. Well, how is the way? Because so few people do this or even object. They send the tax money in. They vote for the politicians. They don't get in the way of squat. So they're saying that's not the way to do it. Well, how would you do it? It's not ending. You see, we're on the verge of nuclear war, man. We almost had a nuclear war a couple of months ago. We came real close, and we may still. I mean, the buzz in the media is Israel was doing major military drills that a lot of commentators think point to a major attack against Iran, perhaps even before Christmas time, which would almost certainly result in a nuclear war. And yet, people just, they write about it. You know, well, Israel's doing this, and so is anyone, actually putting their body on the line against this? You see, I don't think it's just a metaphysical question. What do you do with your quantum of life energy? Do you just go along to get along? Well, you're going to use honey. This was the criticism against Martin Luther King back in the 60s. Well, you're just causing problems. You're making people argue. If you were just constructed, we know what you're against. What are you for? And finally, the United States Army blew his brains out because he was so outspoken against the Vietnam War. And you know what stopped the Vietnam War? There were so many people who got arrested by going down to military recruiting centers and saying, I disagree with what's going on here. I object. And actually, the Berrigan brothers went to a military recruiting center in Catonsville, Maryland, and threw blood on the on the files. And but you know what? After a few years of that, and hundreds of thousands of people in the street, and hundreds of thousands of young men who violated the so-called law that said they had to go to another country and kill people in that other country, they violated the law, and the expression was, hell no, I won't go. It stopped because people objected. They threw a hell of a lot of honey, of vinegar at the machine. They refused. They burned their draft cards. Hey, look at this, baby. I'm burning it. Here's what I think of your so-called law. Here's what, they burned the American flag. Why? Because it was a symbol of 3 million people got killed in Vietnam, man.
Well, I think we're aware of that, and I think Martin Luther King succeeded brilliantly, and of course...
And he went to jail again and again for violating the law. Violating the law.
I agree. But I think that in today's world, I think... Yeah. In today's world, I think your books have done great work, and I think this is helping to change the agenda. It's putting something that needed to be talked about, the trillions being put into this for a dark purpose.
And we don't know what the purpose is.
And we don't know what the purpose is. And I'm totally with you on that. But I'm not convinced that in today's America, protests are going to work. But hey, we can disagree on that.
Well, I think they'd better, because if they don't, look at this budget deal, the so-called debt ceiling deal that went through the Congress a matter of days ago. It essentially meant that trillions more will be sucked out of the economy. And you know what? If you and a lot of other people don't protest about it, just lay down on the ground belly up, because you're just going to be stomped on the rest of your days. Just take it then.
Well, I think in the alternative press world that there are different people taking different approaches. Some people
and you know what? There's a lot of penetration.
Excuse me.
Let me finish. There's a lot of penetration in the so-called alternative press world by the agencies, and that's one thing that Fletcher Prudy made clear. This was back with his book in 75, 76, entitled "The Secret Team," how the agency, especially, but not only the CIA, put their people everywhere, in every newsroom, in every television channel, etc. And they determine the agenda, and they set the tone of the news and the atmosphere of the society, or try to determine the terms of debate, etc. He was very clear about that, and they devote millions of dollars to this, and they put their people everywhere in publishing houses, in radio and television, movies, etc., in the academic world, prominent intellectuals, etc. He was very clear about that. And it's no different today, including on the internet, including some media outlets that pretend to be cutting edge and alternative. And in fact, they're fronts for the agencies.
Oh, I agree with you. That's totally obvious as far as I'm concerned. But I do think, though, that different people have different. Yes, it is. But different people have different opinions about what approaches are either good as for the broader society or just good for them.
Well, let me tell you something. I think
your choice was leaving. You left, right? That's a totally rational choice. I don't blame you at all.
If you're in a burning house, the sane thing to do is to run out. Now, but let me go on. I think I don't know your age. I'm 58 years old. I grew up in the South. I was born and spent the first part of my life under the Jim Crow system. I was born in a white family, and there were black people around, but because of racial segregation, we didn't mix with them too much. And this was true all across the South, like in 25% of the continental United States. But then when I grew to be, junior high school age, the schools were integrated, and so from that age on, I had daily interaction with black kids, and then as I got older, with more and more people. And now the system has completely changed. It changed because millions of people went into the streets, black, but not only black, a lot of white people as well, and said, no, I don't agree with this. Your law is wrong. The system as it's set up is unethical, it's immoral, it's evil. I can't participate, I can't support it, and I won't. You're telling me that the American of today doesn't need that it's not appropriate. I'm telling you, not only does it need it today, it needs it more than ever. And if it was appropriate in the 50s and 60s, it's vastly more appropriate today. And if you don't want to...
Well, then are you going back to the states to lead these, to start these demonstrations?
Do you know what? If American people want to be free, they have to do it themselves. Listen to me. I have done what I had to do. If I go and do everything for everyone else, I prevent you from having the opportunity to stand up. Other people have an obligation to stand up. It's not all about me. I'm one man of billions. There's more than 7 billion people on the planet. There are more than 300 million people in the United States. Over and over again, I stood up. I can't tell you how I've been mocked and scorned and ridiculed. And people have talked down to me and lectured me, et cetera, et cetera. And I took all of that. I went to jail. I've been handcuffed more times than I can tell you. Just like Dr. King and millions of other people during the civil rights era. And only because they did that, not just Dr. King, but millions of other people, lots of other people arrested and sent to jail and faced down so-called law enforcement. And I'm telling you, it was important in the 1950s and 1960s when I was a little kid, and it's even more important today. And if people don't do it, I mean, what is your option? It's slavery. So if I come back and do it for you, then you know what? You haven't learned a thing. And in my opinion, a lot of people need to learn to stand up on their own 2 feet, They have skin in the game. If it doesn't matter enough to them to stand up, okay, then be a slave. Pay $16 trillion, $30 trillion, $40 trillion. But I've reached the point where I won't do that. If you want to, okay. And without protest, without complaining, without objecting, okay, that's your decision. It's not mine.
Well, we could go a lot of different directions with this. For one thing, I think protests since the mid-70s, since Vietnam, haven't worked. Okay, you may disagree, but I can tell you.
I do disagree.
Okay, well, but let me
ahead.
finish. Okay, next, I think in the case of the civil rights, I think that the elite in the North wanted the civil rights laws to go through. It was the elite in the South who were against it. And so I think that's why it eventually came through so cleanly, is because of that power struggle fight. The Northeastern establishment couldn't have America's image so badly damaged by
And yet it
overt
was
racism.
a Southern president from Texas who pushed through so much of the a member of the so-called Southern elite who pushed through so much of the civil rights legislation. Lyndon
Well, it was
Baines Johnson.
divisive thing, but I'm just saying that I don't think. I mean, look, when did King get cut down? He got cut down because he started talking social justice in Vietnam, not just letting blacks vote. You know what I mean? Getting rid of Jim Crow wasn't that bad, but stopping Vietnam was a much more painful thing for him because all the business interests. But I'm just going to argue since the 1970s, the big protests have been what? The big one I can remember is around 1980 or whatever, the big anti-nuke protests.
They weren't that big. They weren't that big. They were nowhere near as large as the civil rights protests, and not as large.
I know, but those are the only ones I can
prolonged.
remember since the mid-70s. I mean, you can refresh our memory, but that's
well,
about
the Occupy movement. The Occupy movement would be the most recent one, but there again, it was pretty small, and it was also only 1 year, and then people stopped doing it.
Well, I think the image in America is that protests are totally infiltrated by these agents provocateurs and the police, and they don't work very well, even in liberal cities or whatever. So it's a tough fight on that front.
We have to understand
Now, what you did was not protesting that way, though. You went to actual missile bases, which is a much more...
How many people do that? Like one out of 100,000, one out of a million? Maybe not even one in a million. But let's say if you want to really be effective, you have to unplug from the system. What is that? Don't pay the IRS. Don't go in the military. Don't work for the Fortune 500. Now, by their millions, people have decided to work for the Fortune 500. By the millions, people have decided to go into the military. Overwhelmingly, people have decided to pay the IRS, and so the machine grinds on.
Well, I agree. We could argue over this for a long time. I think that, as I said, it's a machine is the problem, and so
I'm not going to argue for a long time. I'm through arguing. That's it.
Okay. Well, I tell you what. Why don't we wrap up this episode? I think we've gotten our points across, and I think it's pretty clear that you've really, really put your heart into this and your body and soul on the line for this issue. And I think I'm speaking for a lot of people when I say how much we appreciate that. And I definitely like your work a lot. The Underground books are very, very valuable, and people should check them out if they haven't. So if you'd like to give us your blog again and then mention, I guess, your last book, that would be good.
Absolutely. The blog is www.eventhorizonChronicle.blogspot.com. My most recent book is Hidden in Plain Sight, Beyond the X-Files, and predominantly deals with secret underground and underwater bases and tunnels.
Okay, well, thanks again so much for coming, Richard. We do appreciate it. Oolong, thanks for joining us for the ride. And again, what can I say? This is another episode of bringing you, the listener, important information. So till next week, take care, everyone. Bye-bye. Thanks for coming.